So the title of this panel is thinking about better living through big data. So for this topic, millions, billions of sensors are coming online, from Internet of Things to wearable technologies to just your mobile phones. For some industries, the implications of these data streams are a bit more clear. We were interested in how these technologies apply to the individual and how they might help us achieve balance and fulfillment in our lives, and what kind of services do we have to look forward to. So, huge sweeping topic. I'm sure we'll not cover it in the half hour that we have ahead of us, but to start off, I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves.
I'm Seth Forges. I'm co-founder of Cloth App.
Hi everyone, I'm Stephen Dean. I started the chapter of Quantified Self here in New York and partner at Prehype.
I'm Tara Greer. I'm Executive Creative Director of Deutsch LA's Product Service Design and Platform Group. And I guess my claim to fame in this space is I was the Creative Director of the Nike Plus Fuel Band when that launched.
Excellent. So Seth, why don't you just kick us off? What has big data meant to the individual at this point? And where are these information streams coming from?
Sure. It means a lot less now than it's going to, because I think right now a lot of the industry is trying to figure out what do we do with this. There's a signal-to-noise ratio issue right now. We have big data, capital B, capital D, coming in at this massive fire hose pace. And it's still sort of the Wild West in terms of understanding both how you can actually parse useful data from this and then what you can do with that data. Because right now, anybody in this room can take some data feed and draw the conclusion they want to draw from it by picking the right data points. It's sort of like, I don't know if anybody here is a brain imager. You can look at an fMRI scan and you can tweak the settings so whatever point you want to prove, you can prove. And this is an issue right now because there's all these interests that want to use data for their own industries and to prove whatever perspective they have. But whether it actually legitimately works in the way they say it works or does what they say it does or can help customers and in the way they say it can help it is still being figured out.
Excellent. And Stephen?
So I think most from an individual perspective, I think most people don't know what big data means, but clearly many individuals are experiencing a lot of value out of big data and about sharing information. So whether it's entertain me more based on my viewing habits on Netflix, or help me buy things that I want, the right things that I want on Amazon. So there are many services out there that are using data which is invisible to the user. They don't know that they're actually generating this, but it's providing value back to the consumer.
Great. And Tara?
Yeah, I'd say that's true. We're sort of like living in a big data environment, whether we acknowledge that or not. A lot of it is kind of silently happening in the background. I'd say sort of on a more kind of overt level, the sort of big data streams that we're looking at, especially through Internet of Things, sort of roughly fall into 4 categories. There's like my body and my fitness. There's kind of like health monitoring. There's like what's happening in the home, and there's what's happening kind of in vehicles. So you can kind of think about new data streams kind of happening through all of those different sort of sensor points. A lot of them fall into that sort of, hey, look, we can do this kind of space, as Seth was saying. A couple of favorites in that way. I really like the smart chopsticks. I don't know if anyone saw Baidu release those. And they detect whether or not you're eating gutter oil, which, if you don't know that concept, is pretty disgusting. It's basically enterprising individuals going and recycling oil and then putting it back into your food. So these chopsticks help you to understand whether that's happened to you or not. So there's some sort of like, interesting, weird applications of this kind of technology that I think we'll start seeing become more meaningful.
I want to add one thing to what he was saying too. What big data becomes immensely important to when you're talking about the individual consumer is as the availability of different types of content and different types of entertainment and different types of services out there grows to the point where no one man can curate their own selection of TV shows and apps and anything on their own. Data becomes the de facto curator. And that's when it's become even more and more important, because you think we have a lot of apps now, just wait till 10 years. You think we have a lot of digital streaming options now, wait till 10 years. And without data to sort of curate it for us, it's going to be extremely messy.
That's great, and sort of feeds into the next question, which, Stephen, I wanted to ask you about. Just in terms of user experience, what's going to define best-in-class experience for how we interface with this information in ways that's most useful to us?
Well, when I think about data, and I encourage others who are building products and services in this field that I would opt for experiences that are closer to narrative and storytelling over charts and graphs. Numbers have little meaning to most people, and so if you look at some of the great services out there who've tried to take data and numbers, and dating sites are the ones that I think tell a real narrative and a story that make meaning out of the data that's there that you're generating based on your behaviors.
Tara,
Yeah, there's sort of like, a big gap between big data and big wisdom, I think, and like really trying to extract understanding out of data, I think is like sort of the big design challenge of our times. And I think, we're going to see a lot more of, it's not just a user experience problem, it's a data science, technology, user experience, data visualization problem. And I think all of those sort of people have got to come together to help us solve those problems. And I think real kind of insight is really where we're lacking. We sort of used to think that measurement, on some level was an epiphany, understanding, but we've discovered that, raw data streams coming out of these devices they're not very interesting. So I think our challenge now is to sort of like move beyond that and try and create really interesting, meaningful experiences, which is a struggle for us all. We're all sort of trying to crack that nut.
Sure, absolutely.
So I think big data, except for the early adopters, the quantified self-typers who actually want to see the machinations and how it works works best when it's invisible. I think like no visualization is the best visualization for 95% of applications of data. There's, of course, early adopters who are going to want to see how it works. Developers are going to have blog posts kind of showing how they get to what they're doing to some degree. But really, when it comes to nuts and bolts, I don't want to see the algorithm that Netflix uses to tell me what to watch. I just want to watch something good. And it's especially going to be the case when big data becomes even bigger data, and we would risk fatigue from having to dig into all these visualizations and 17 different dashboards, or it's overwhelming for me being a semi-early adopter. I can't even imagine how my mom would handle it. And so I think the more invisible it is, the more it can be useful to people without scaring them and without kind of leading to data fatigue as well.
Yeah, I think there's sort of like a really interesting balance between these sort of like quiet sensors, which we've turned into these sort of like noisy kind of look at me sort of experiences, and I don't think they need to be. I think it's more about sort of elegant and meaningful interruption when it's needed. So things that tell you things only when it's sort of necessary to tell you something of meaning, I think is a really important sort of concept that we have yet, I think, as designers to sort of really digest.
Yeah, in the wearables space, I'm working on a project right now where we talk a lot about striking a balance between really accurate sensing and tracking and a form factor that we can and want to live with. So I think that the first wave of a lot of these devices, we're so heavily focused on getting accurate data, maybe not that important. Mm-hmm. What's really important is that form factor, something that we want to live with, something that we can live with.
Excellent.
Especially like what is the end game? Is the reason you wear the fitness tracker to know how many calories you're burning or to work out more?
Yeah.
And if you can kind of nudge it, so maybe what you're getting isn't the most accurate, but it gets a better end result for the end user, there's value to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I've been wanting someone, and I don't know why I haven't done this yet, but I've been wanting someone, so maybe someone here can go out and design this. I've been wanting someone to build a body weight scale that instead of giving back your number of your weight, it just tells you whether you're up or down.
And keeps it like blind, everything else?
Everything else is blind.
Kickstarted. You guys can all
Binary
help us
scale.
crowdfund this.
Everyone, let's do it.
I like it. I think like on the other end of the spectrum, there's sort of an interesting space in really accessible hacking, though, like of people being able to kind of put together their own big data streams. And I think as sort of, like that sort of if this then that recipe mentality becomes a bit more pervasive, we'll see people actually sort of taking control of their own big data and repurposing it in more interesting ways, which I think, so there's sort of like the retreat and invisibility on one level, but then there's also the participation and sort of direction, which I think is like another whole kind of theme.
And this is really important because the more big data we get out there, especially as a content curation system, the closer we are to running the risk of losing taste and losing the human element. And I come from the magazine world, and what makes magazines great is that you have talented editors who have instincts and tastes that would not be reflective in a focus group or in a massive data stream about what we should publish. And and I think it's very, very important going forward that any application of big data, especially in the content space, I think, you still have the idea that people can experiment outside of what the data tells you to do and to curate it based on their own gut.
Yeah.
And Tara, maybe can you help us think, are people expecting something in return for their information at this point, which feeds into larger questions around privacy? So are they conscious that data might be valuable to themselves and then maybe expecting something in return for it?
Yeah, definitely more and more so. I mean, I think, it's interesting. I think a couple of years ago, we kind of thought about big data as kind of a bit utopian, and maybe naively thought that it was going to, help us to solve a whole lot of problems, and it didn't feel, so scary that all this data was sort of being collected from us. I think we're seeing some sort of like big rebellion against big data, and what that means. There's a great lawsuit in France against, I think it's Facebook and Google, basically accusing them of using people as free workers, toiling away, collecting data, and not getting paid for it, which is very French, in the best possible way. But I think, that sort of mentality, like people are really starting to question, like, why are we giving this away? Who does it own? Rather, who is it owned by? Because really our data should be our property on some level, but that's not how it's treated. It's treated like it's the property of the people who are collecting it. And I think that's a very interesting, moral question for us probably all to grapple with.
Absolutely.
And this is, I think one of the greatest possibilities of big data is something that has probably gotten the most controversy about lately. It's when big tech companies unwillingly do experiments, social experiments on people for research purposes. And I think this is so, so exciting because there's so much to learn in this science, and it's so hard to get together any meaningful sample size, especially a blind sample size, to do any sort of study. And if Facebook or Google or OkCupid can do this and it can benefit actual grant research, that's a real way of giving back to people. I think it's really, really interesting, and I wish people were a little bit less scared of that, personally.
But maybe one of the ways that they can be less scared is that those companies be much more upfront about what it is that they're going to do with the data. I was having a conversation yesterday with my colleague who was describing an experience that he had several years ago where he had set up a profile on a dating site. I won't mention the dating site. And then about a year later, saw his picture in ads on billboards, on subways. Friends told him about it.
Must have been a good-looking guy.
And of course, he contacted the company, and they said that his profile had ranked so high based on the big data that it made sense to post it. But that's one of those examples. Like if you're gonna upload your photo, then tell me that this is one of the things that we might
It's
do.
in tiny print. If you scroll down through the user agreement about page 73, it's there. Yeah.
So let's not do that.
It's had 365 days this year. It's been a great year. Well, Seth, anything else to add?
No, I think it's a lot to say here. Yeah.
Excellent. So just thinking about the broader ecosystem which we're living in. So what might our future interactions look like? Interacting within connected ecosystems, how are they going to be responding to us and our personal needs and the preferences that we're uploading, the data being captured about ourselves?
Well, I'll say, I think there are a lot of things, a lot of decisions that I make on a day-to-day basis that I'd be more than happy to outsource to an algorithm. What I eat, this is for me. I'd like to know what I need to eat each day, prioritizing my work tasks. I would love for a machine to help me with that. So I think that as we get more and more data and the folks come in who can facilitate making meaning between these different services, and if it's things which I request and I ask and it's valuable to me, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think that concept of kind of like the mesh of all of these different systems is actually pretty powerful and like a different way of thinking about experience. Like at the moment we think about designing experiences and they're very singular. It's like we are making an app or we are making a site or we are making a device, and they're all kind of, these kind of separate things. I think we're going to see a lot more kind of communication between all of those different pieces of the network, and hopefully to a helpful end rather than a terrifying one. But I mean, I think it would be great to kind of like get more contextual information that was coming from multiple different places rather than just these kind of like islands of information, which is sort of where we are right now.
Yeah, right now we have 300 big datas instead of the biggest data.
Yeah.
And at some point, it's going to need to link together to be sort of useful. And that's a scary prospect to people. That it is very big brother. And so it needs to be done with taste and generosity and sympathy to the subjects, us being humans who are part of it.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, just one final question, unfortunately. But help us picture one data-driven service we might look forward to as consumers going forward. Seth, maybe you want to kick us off?
Give me a minute.
All right, we'll start at the other end.
Yeah.
Do you want to start?
Yeah, I can start. I have something on my mind.
Yeah.
You may have noticed that I'm 8 months pregnant. So I've been, if you've ever done that yourself or have a wife who's done that, it's quite anxiety producing, actually, because you don't know what's going on inside there. And I was kind of like looking at pregnancy tech, and it's in a really hilarious place right now. You can get these big belts that you can strap onto your belly with like multiple sensors that no one in their right mind would wear, that sort of tell you all about your baby's kicks and heartbeat and things like that. And I was just like, it would be great to have a very discreet version of that. And just maybe something that just says, he's okay.
I have a lot of interest in aging, and we talk a lot about it. It's mostly very much a visual feedback that we understand. I would really like to know how it is that we are aging, adding more and more sensors. I'm actually a believer in more sensors. There's still a lot of information that we don't know about what's going on in our bodies, and specifically around aging, I think would be very fascinating.
Excellent.
So I think one of the things that big data is focused on right now in a huge way is sentiment and mood and how you're feeling. And if this massive trove of data can be harnessed to just help mental health in general and understand what makes people happy in a way we really currently don't understand, that would be really, really powerful, I think.
Great.
Agree.
Well, my thanks to the panelists. Appreciate you guys coming up here.